The grandmother hurried to visit her late son's grave. But as she leaned toward the tombstone, she turned pale when she saw that. Donna Emilia's house was modest, with adobe walls and a wooden door that creaked in the wind. She woke up every morning before dawn to prepare breakfast for her grandson, Matthias. The kitchen smelled of freshly brewed coffee and warm bread, but something else lingered in the air. Something heavy. Something that made her heart beat with unease. Since her son Julian had passed away, her life had never been the same. She had resigned herself to her grief, but what worried her most was Matthias. The 8-year-old boy who had sad eyes and trembling hands every time his mother, Camila, spoke to him. "Grandma, can I stay with you today, too?" Matthias asked softly, clutching Emilia's sleeve as she poured milk into his cup. "Of course, my dear. You will always have a place here," she replied, gently stroking his hair. Matthias didn't need to say more. His silence said it all. Camila had changed since Julian's death. She had become unpredictable, distant, with sharp words and empty stares. She would disappear for hours, sometimes days, and when she returned, she carried an unsettling aura. Her dark eyes seemed filled with shadows, and her skin smelled of cheap perfume mixed with a faint trace of alcohol. That morning, Emilia watched her cautiously as she entered the kitchen, dressed in an outfit that seemed out of place in such a humble home. High heels, deep red lips, and a coat that didn't match the season. "Where are you going dressed like that?" Emilia asked bluntly. Camila didn't even look at her. She took out a small pocket mirror and touched up her lipstick with an automatic gesture. "That's none of your business," she replied coldly. Emilia dried her hands on her apron and faced her fearlessly. "If you're in trouble, tell me. We can still do something before it's too late." A flash of irritation crossed Camila's face. She walked over to the table and picked up a cup of coffee, her fingers tapping impatiently against the porcelain. "Always the same thing," she murmured. "Why don't you focus on what you do best?" Filling Matthias's head with stories about how wonderful Julian was. The comment hit Emilia like a punch to the chest. The pain was still fresh, like a wound that refused to close. "Julian was a good man," she whispered tensely. "He didn't deserve what happened to him." Camila placed the cup on the table with more force than necessary. "Don't start," she warned. "We've already talked about this." Emilia's expression didn't waver. "No, Camila. We haven't talked about anything. You just keep avoiding the subject over and over again." The tension in the kitchen was palpable. Matthias looked at his mother with a frown, his small hands clenched into fists on his lap. Camila sighed in frustration and stood up, adjusting her coat. "I don't have time for this. I'll be back later." Emilia followed her with her gaze as she left the house. Through the window, she watched her walk hurriedly down the dusty road, as if she were running away from something or someone. The ominous feeling that had been haunting her for months grew stronger. Something was wrong. Darkness in the night. The hours passed slowly. Matthias played on the floor with a few plastic cars, but every so often, he would lift his eyes toward the door, waiting for his mother to return. The night fell with a heavy, cold air. Emilia prepared dinner and served Matthias his plate, but the boy barely touched his food. "What if Mom doesn't come back?" he asked in a low voice. Emilia set her spoon down and took his hand. "You will be safe here, my dear. No matter what happens." Matthias nodded, but his eyes reflected something deeper than fear. Emilia felt a knot form in her stomach. The silence in the house was suddenly broken by the sound of a door slamming shut. Emilia immediately stood up from the table. Camila was back. But she wasn't alone. A tall man, dressed in a dark jacket with a sharp gaze, stood at the entrance. His presence filled the small house with a sense of latent threat. "Who is he?" Emilia asked, her heart pounding. Camila took off her heels and dropped into a chair with feigned exhaustion. "Mauricio. A friend." The man offered a smile that never reached his eyes. "A pleasure to meet you, ma'am," he said in a deep voice. Emilia did not return the greeting. Something about him made her skin crawl. Matthias hid behind his grandmother, gripping her skirt tightly. Mauricio shifted his gaze to the boy and smiled in an unsettling way. "So, This is Matthias. He looks like his father. Amelia's heart pounded against her chest. How do you know Julian? The air grew thick. Camila immediately stood up and shot Mauricio a sharp look. Let's not talk about that right now. Mauricio let out a quiet chuckle. Always so tense, Camila. Why don't you tell her the truth? Amelia's stomach twisted. What truth? She asked firmly. Camila grabbed Mauricio's arm and gently pushed him toward the door. It's late. We'll talk later. Mauricio allowed himself to be led away, but before stepping out, he leaned slightly toward Amelia and whispered, "Make sure to take good care of your grandson. You never know who might be watching." The air turned icy. A shiver ran down Amelia's spine as she watched Mauricio's silhouette fade into the darkness of the street. When the door closed, Amelia turned to Camila, barely containing her fury. Who the hell is that man? Camila ran a hand through her hair, visibly nervous. Just someone who helped me with a few problems. What kind of problems? Camila didn't respond immediately. She walked to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water with trembling hands. Stay out of this, Amelia. You have no idea what's at stake. The grandmother felt a knot form in her throat. If Matthias is in danger, I have every right to know. Camila's dark, cold eyes met hers. If you keep interfering, you'll regret it. A deadly silence took over the house. Amelia had never felt fear like this before. Matthias, his small, trembling shadow cast against the wall, clung to the edge of the table. The night dragged on, but Amelia couldn't sleep. Every word, every gesture from Camila and Mauricio repeated in her mind like a sinister echo. Something was wrong, and she was going to find out what, even if it meant risking everything. The clock read 3 in the morning when Amelia got out of bed. Sleep wouldn't come. Her heart hadn't found peace since that man had crossed her doorway with that smile hiding something dark. She lit a candle and walked to the window. Outside, the dirt road was empty. Only the sound of crickets in the distance and the wind slipping through the cracks in the houses could be heard. Matthias slept in his small cot, his face serene, but his tiny fist clenched tightly around his blanket. She had barely turned her head to check on the boy when she heard a noise in the living room. A faint sound, but enough to make her feel she was not alone. Her steps were cautious as she moved down the dark hallway. The dim light made the shadows seem to shift. Camila's bedroom door was slightly ajar. A thin strip of yellow light seeped through from inside. Through the crack, Amelia saw her sitting on the bed, back turned, with her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low, but the tone was tense, as if she feared someone might be listening. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," Camila murmured. Amelia is getting too suspicious. Her grandmother's stomach twisted. "Do you think I don't realize what's going on? It's not that easy to make something like this disappear." The voice on the other end was unintelligible, but Camila's reaction made it clear that she didn't like the conversation. "No, I won't do it. Not until I find another way out of this." The silence on the line lasted only a few seconds before she whispered one last sentence. "If anyone finds out, we're dead." She hung up and sat still, staring at the wall. Amelia carefully stepped back and returned to her room. She sat on her bed, hands trembling. The suspicion she had carried for months had just turned into certainty. Camila was involved in something that could cost them dearly. Several hours passed before dawn. The morning light filtered through the window as Amelia finally made a decision. She was going to find out what was happening. A tense breakfast. When Matthias woke up, Amelia had already prepared breakfast. Scrambled eggs, bread, and coffee for herself. Warm milk with a bit of honey for her grandson. "Grandma," the boy called in a quiet voice. "Yes, my love?" Matthias took his time to speak. He shifted in his chair, staring at his plate without touching his food. "Do you think Mom loves me?" Amelia's spoon froze in midair. "Why do you ask that?" The boy lifted his head, his dark eyes filled with the anguish of a truth he had been hiding for a long time. "Sometimes, when she thinks I'm asleep, I hear her say I shouldn't have been born." Pain stabbed through Amelia's chest like a cold dagger. "Don't say that, Matthias. You are a very special boy. You are the best thing that ever happened to this family." Matthias tried to smile, but it faded as soon as the front door opened. Camila walked in, her eyes red as if she hadn't slept. She was still wearing the same clothes from the night before. She went straight to the table and poured herself some coffee without saying a word. Emilia didn't take her eyes off her. "Aren't you going to explain what happened last night?" Camila tensed at the question. "There's nothing to explain." "Oh, really?" "Because I clearly heard you telling someone that if this gets out, we're dead." The sound of coffee pouring into the cup was the only noise in the kitchen. "It's not what you think," Camila replied without looking up. Emilia crossed her arms. "Then tell me what it is." Camila pressed her lips together and took a sip of coffee before standing up. "I have to go." Her grandmother felt her blood boil. "You can't keep running from this." Camila stopped at the door and looked over her shoulder. "I'm not the one they should be afraid of." A chill ran down Emilia's spine. The door closed, and the silence left behind was colder than the morning air. After dropping Matthias off at school, Emilia took a different path. She had no idea where Camila went every time she disappeared, but today she was going to find out. She followed her daughter-in-law from a distance, making sure to stay out of her field of vision. Camila walked briskly through the town streets until she reached a discreet cafe on the corner of an avenue. From across the street, Emilia watched her go inside and take a seat at a secluded table. A few minutes later, a man sat across from her. Mauricio, the same man who had been in their house the night before. Emilia slowly approached and stopped by the window. From there, she could see their gestures, even if she couldn't hear clearly. Camila was speaking quickly, as if trying to convince him of something. Mauricio listened with a crooked smile, stirring his coffee without stopping. At one point, Camila's expression changed. Her lips trembled, and panic filled her eyes. Mauricio grabbed her wrist firmly. Emilia's hands clenched into fists. She didn't understand what was happening, but every part of her being screamed that Camila was in danger. Before she could do anything, Mauricio pulled out an envelope and placed it on the table. Camila took it with trembling hands and hid it in her bag. Emilia's eyes locked onto the envelope. That piece of paper held answers. Camila suddenly stood up and left the cafe. Emilia followed, her heart racing. When her daughter-in-law turned onto a quieter street, she quickened her pace and called out to her. "Camila." She stopped, startled. "What are you doing here?" Emilia stared at her. "I should be asking you that. Who is that man, and what's in that envelope?" Camila took a step back. "Stay out of this. If Matthias is in danger, I won't stay out of it." Camila's eyes filled with fury. "You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Because all I see is a desperate woman hiding something that could cost us dearly." Camila took a deep breath. "If you knew the truth, you'd regret following me." "Then tell me the truth, Camila." She looked around, as if afraid someone was listening. "I can't talk here." "Then come home and tell me what's going on." Camila remained silent. After a few seconds, she nodded. "Fine, but after this, I want you to leave me alone." They walked back without saying a word. Emilia felt her heart pounding in her throat. Whatever Camila was about to say would change everything. When they stepped inside the house, Emilia looked at her firmly. "Now tell me the truth." Camila swallowed hard and opened the envelope with trembling hands. She pulled out some papers and spread them across the table. Emilia took them, and her vision blurred as she read what was written. Her body tensed. "This can't be true." Camila's lips trembled. "It is." Emilia felt the world around her collapse. She had discovered something she never could have imagined. Something that could destroy her family forever. The papers on the table seemed to burn under Emilia's gaze. The printed letters blurred as her breathing grew erratic. Her hands trembled as she held those sheets that contained the truth. A truth she never would have expected. Camila, her lips pressed together and her eyes filled with a mix of fear and despair, watched her without moving. "Tell me this is a lie," Emilia whispered, her voice breaking. Camila lowered her gaze. "I can't." The silence that followed was unbearable. Emilia felt the ground beneath her feet become unstable, as if everything she had believed for years was about to crumble. Her eyes returned to the papers. Fake names, bank accounts with exorbitant amounts, and a document indicating that her son, Julian, had transferred large sums of money before he died. "This doesn't make sense," she murmured. "Julian never had that kind of money. We could barely afford to live." Camila narrowed her eyes. "Because he never told you what was going on." Amelia's heart pounded. "What are you talking about?" Camila leaned against the table, exhaling in frustration. Julian was involved in something dangerous. Amelia shook her head. "No, my son was a good man. Being good doesn't mean being innocent." The air in the room grew heavy. Matthias played in the next room, oblivious to the tense conversation unfolding just a few feet away. Amelia felt the pain in her chest expand like a fire impossible to put out. "Explain. Now." Camila closed her eyes for a moment before speaking. Before he died, Julian had discovered something he wasn't supposed to know. What did he find out? Camila swallowed hard. A fraud. A dirty scheme he got caught up in without meaning to. Amelia felt her throat go dry. "That's impossible." "It's not." Julian started noticing inconsistencies in the finances of the company he worked for. There were unexplained money movements, transfers to unknown accounts. When he tried to talk to his boss, he was fired. Amelia stared at her in disbelief. "He never mentioned any of this." Camila let out a bitter laugh. "Because he wanted to protect you." Amelia's heart clenched at those words. "So, they killed him?" Camila didn't answer right away. Her eyes remained fixed on the documents on the table. "I have no proof, but I don't think it was an accident." Amelia's mind went blank. Oh my God. Her legs threatened to give out, but she held onto the back of a chair. "You have to go to the police." Camila let out a shaky sigh. "I can't." "Why not?" Camila clenched her fists. "Because I'm involved too." The words hit Amelia like a hammer blow. "What are you saying?" Camila lowered her voice as if afraid someone might hear. "Mauricio forced me to be part of this." Amelia's stomach twisted. "That man, does he have something to do with Julian's death?" Camila bit her lower lip. "I don't know for sure. What I do know is that he was part of the company where Julian worked. And I also know that ever since his death, Mauricio has been making sure I stay quiet." Silence stretched for several seconds. Amelia felt the air leave her lungs. "So, he's threatening you?" Camila slowly nodded. "If I confess, they'll come for me. And if something happens to me, Matthias will be in danger." The words were like poison spreading through Amelia's veins. She looked at her grandson, still playing, unaware of everything. If everything Camila was saying was true, they were trapped in something much bigger than she had imagined. Fear turned into anger. "I won't let that man keep controlling you." Camila looked at her with anguish. "There's no other way. There's always a way." Camila shook her head. "You don't understand. Mauricio isn't just a con man. He's a murderer." Amelia's body tensed. "How do you know?" Camila swallowed hard. "Because I saw him kill someone." Amelia felt the world come to a halt. "What?" Camila shut her eyes tightly. "When Julian died, I had already had encounters with Mauricio. I knew he was involved in shady business, but I never imagined how far he would go." A chill ran down Amelia's spine. "Who did he kill?" Camila looked at her desperately. "A man who also tried to turn him in." The silence became unbearable. Amelia put her hands on her head. Everything she thought she knew was crumbling. "This can't be happening." Camila stood up from the chair. "If you don't want to believe me, that's fine. But this is real. And if we get any deeper into this, we could be next." Fear took hold of Amelia, but something inside her refused to give in. "I can't let this go unpunished." Camila looked at her in desperation. "You have no idea what kind of danger you're getting yourself into." Amelia took a deep breath. "What I do know is that I can't just stand by while my son's killer walks free." The grandmother felt determination tightening in her chest. Camila watched her with a mix of admiration and fear. "If we're going to do something, we have to be smart about it. What do you suggest?" Camila swallowed hard. "I have evidence, but I need help getting it out of where it is without Mauricio finding out." Amelia felt the tension in the room become unbearable. Where's this evidence? Camila glanced toward the window, as if afraid someone might be listening. In Mauricio's office. A chill ran through Emilia's body. Then we'll have to get in there without being seen. Camila stared at her in disbelief. Are you saying you want to steal it? Emilia clenched her teeth. I'm saying I won't let them keep getting away with this. Silence stretched between them. Camila took a deep breath and nodded. Then we have to do this right. The two women looked at each other, knowing there was no turning back. The truth was closer than they had imagined. But so was the danger. The silence in the room felt endless. Emilia and Camila locked eyes, neither blinking, as if waiting for the other to back down, but neither did. The grandmother was the first to speak. If we're going to do this, it has to be fast. Camila swallowed, her eyes filled with unease. It's not that simple. Mauricio's office isn't a place you can just walk into. There are cameras, security, and employees who see everything. Emilia crossed her arms, feeling the tension build inside her. We won't go in during the day. Camila frowned. Are you saying we have to do it at night? The old woman nodded. If this man is really as dangerous as you say, then we can't give him a chance to react. Camila sighed and ran her hands through her hair. I don't know how I let this go so far. Emilia didn't take her eyes off her. Because you didn't have a choice. But now we do. The atmosphere grew heavy. A few meters away, Matthias played in his room, unaware of the conversation happening in the living room. Camila pressed her lips together. If something goes wrong, Mauricio won't just come for me. He'll come for you and for Matthias too. Emilia felt a chill run down her spine, but she didn't let fear paralyze her. That's something we can't allow. Camila lowered her gaze, her hands trembling. I'm going to need help. Emilia tilted her head. From who? Camila pressed her lips together again. There's someone who worked with Mauricio years ago. He was hurt too, but he managed to escape before things got worse. If anyone can help us get inside, it's him. The grandmother felt her heart pound. Where do we find him? Camila remained silent for a moment, as if hesitating to say it. At the cemetery. Emilia frowned. Is he dead? Camila shook her head. No, but he hides there. He knows no one will look for him in a place like that. The tension in the air thickened. Emilia felt every part of her telling her this was madness. But then Matthias' face flashed in her mind, reminding her why she was doing this. Then let's go. A meeting among the tombstones. The sun was about to set when Emilia and Camila arrived at the cemetery. The cold breeze sent shivers down their spines as they walked among the graves, their eyes fixed on the small chapel at the far end. Are you sure he's still here? Emilia whispered. Camila nodded. If he hasn't found another place to hide, yes. When they reached the chapel, they found the door slightly ajar. Camila stopped in front of it and knocked 3 times. Silence answered. Emilia felt something move inside. Suddenly, a raspy voice came from within. I don't take visitors. Camila stepped forward. I need to talk to you, Gasper. The sound of a latch sliding open broke the silence, and the door cracked open just a few inches. A man with a face worn by time and anguish appeared in the doorway. His disheveled hair and dark, darting eyes were full of suspicion. What do you want? Camila took a deep breath. I need your help. Gasper watched her in silence. If you've found me, that means you're bringing trouble. Camila looked at Emilia for a moment before turning her gaze back to him. You know very well that trouble has never left us. The man let out a dry laugh. Then come in. Both women entered the chapel, and the door closed behind them. Gasper led them to the back of the building, where there was a small room filled with boxes and old documents. Tell me what you want before I regret letting you in. Camila took a deep breath. We want evidence against Mauricio. The man's face hardened immediately. If you think I have something against that bastard, you're mistaken. Emilia stepped in. We're not looking for revenge. We want justice. Gasper scoffed. Justice doesn't exist when it comes to people like him. Camila clenched her fists. I can't keep living in fear. Gasper stared at her for a moment before exhaling heavily. What are you willing to do? Emilia didn't hesitate. Whatever it takes. The man studied her for a moment before slowly nodding. There's something that might help you, but it's a risk few people would be willing to take. The atmosphere grew tense. Camila leaned toward him. Say it. Gasper narrowed his eyes. Mauricio has a safe in his office. He keeps documents there that could destroy him. Emilia felt her stomach tighten. How can we open it? Gasper let out a bitter laugh. That's the problem. It doesn't open with a code. It opens with his fingerprint. Silence filled the room. Emilia looked at Camila with concern. That makes it almost impossible. Gasper shook his head. Not if we get something with his fingerprint on it. Camila tensed. That means I have to see him again. The air grew thick with uncertainty. Emilia felt her heart pounding. We can't take too big a risk. Gasper crossed his arms. If you don't, then you're wasting your time here. Camila closed her eyes for a moment before exhaling in frustration. I'm going to do it. Emilia looked at her with anguish. Are you sure? Camila swallowed hard. There's no other option. Gasper watched both of them in silence before speaking. If you manage to get the fingerprint, let me know. I'll take care of the rest. Camila nodded. We'll do it. Gasper stared at them intently before saying goodbye. Then leave before someone sees you. Both of them left the chapel, their hearts pounding. Night loomed over the cemetery as they walked back home. Danger was closer than ever. And now, there was no turning back. The night was a dense shroud of uncertainty as Emilia and Camila returned home. The journey back was cloaked in an eerie silence. Neither of them dared to speak. Every step echoed the weight of the decisions they had made. When they arrived, Emilia gently pushed the door open and found Matthias asleep on the small sofa in the living room. His breathing was steady, his face reflected a peace they could no longer afford to feel. Camila leaned in and gently stroked his hair. He doesn't deserve to live like this, she whispered. Emilia took off her sweater and draped it over the boy. We're not going to let this continue, she replied firmly. Camila straightened up, pressing her lips together. I have to see Mauricio again. Emilia's stomach twisted. That's a huge risk. Camila lowered her gaze, clenching her fists. I know, but we have no other choice. A shiver ran down Emilia's spine. How do you plan to get his fingerprint? Camila took a deep breath, as if trying to draw strength from the air. If there's one thing I know about Mauricio, it's that he likes to drink. He always leaves his glass on the table without thinking twice. Emilia understood immediately. You want to take one of his glasses after he uses it. Camila nodded. If I do it right, he won't even notice. The silence that followed was suffocating. Everything inside Emilia screamed that this was madness. But looking at Matthias reminded her why they were doing this. I'm going with you, she said without hesitation. Camila's eyes widened in surprise. You can't. I'm not letting you face him alone. The firmness in Emilia's voice made Camila realize there was no point in arguing. All right, but you can't interfere no matter what happens. The agreement was sealed in silence. The trap. The following night, Emilia and Camila arrived at the bar where they knew Mauricio spent most of his time. The place was filled with smoke and hoarse voices blending with the background music. From the bar, Mauricio sat with a glass in his hand, swirling it in circles as he watched those around him drink with disinterest. Camila took a deep breath and stepped toward him. Emilia stayed near the entrance, her heart pounding. Mauricio looked up when he saw Camila approaching. Well, what a surprise. Camila forced a smile. I needed to talk to you. Mauricio narrowed his eyes. About what? About what happened the last time we saw each other. Mauricio took a sip of his whiskey and set the glass down on the table. You have nothing to tell me that I don't already know. Camila sat down across from him. Maybe I do. Mauricio studied her with curiosity. Go ahead, I'm listening. From a distance, Emilia watched as Camila leaned toward him and spoke in a low voice. It was part of the plan. To distract him long enough for him to lower his guard. Mauricio smirked arrogantly and took another sip of his drink. Camila subtly glanced at the glass. Don't you ever get tired of coming to this place? Mauricio let out a dry laugh. Habits are hard to change. Camila gave a slight smile. Let me buy you another one. Mauricio raised an eyebrow. Since when are you so generous? Camila stood up before answering. Since I realized there's no reason for us to be fighting. Mauricio looked at her for a moment before signaling the waitress. Then bring another round. The plan was working. When the drink arrived, Mauricio picked up the new glass and carelessly set the previous one aside. Camila kept chatting with him while Amelia, taking advantage of a moment of distraction, quickly walked over to the bar and grabbed the used glass with a cloth. She tucked it into her bag and left the bar with trembling hands. Fear lurks. Hours later, at Amelia's house, the two women sat at the table, staring at the glass with Mauricio's fingerprint. Now we have what we need, Camila murmured. Amelia nodded, feeling a wave of relief. Tomorrow we'll go see Gasper. But before they could continue talking, a noise at the door made them jump. A sharp knock. Camila immediately stood up. Are you expecting someone? Amelia shook her head. The second knock was louder. And then, a voice that sent chills down their spines. I know you're in there. It was Mauricio. Camila covered her mouth with her hand, trembling. Amelia turned off the light and motioned for her daughter-in-law to stay silent. The knocking continued. Don't make me lose my patience. The two women remained motionless. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the knocking stopped. But they didn't dare move until they were sure he was gone. Fear still hung in the air. They knew this wasn't over. The real danger was just beginning. The house remained dark for hours after Mauricio left. Amelia and Camila sat in the living room, their muscles tense, the air thick with fear. The silence weighed on them like an invisible threat. The glass with Mauricio's fingerprint was still on the table, wrapped in a cloth, as if it were the only tangible proof that they were at war with someone capable of anything. Camila swallowed hard and rested her forehead on her trembling hands. I shouldn't have gone to see him. Amelia looked at her sternly. Don't say that. Now we have what we need. Camila looked up, and in her eyes, there was more than just fear. There was desperation. And what good is it if he already suspects us? This won't stop, Amelia. The grandmother felt the weight of those words in her chest. We won't stop either. The door remained locked. The curtains were drawn. Matthias slept in his room, unaware of the danger lurking outside. Camila leaned her head against the wall and closed her eyes. We have to end this as soon as possible. Amelia nodded. Tomorrow, we'll take this to Gasper. The night dragged on slowly. Their bodies grew exhausted, but sleep never fully came. Mauricio had sent them a clear message, and they knew he wasn't the kind of man to give warnings twice. The pact with Gasper. Dawn arrived with the sound of birds and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Amelia prepared breakfast in silence while Matthias was still asleep. Camila stood by the window, anxiously looking out at the street. There's no one outside, she murmured. Amelia placed a cup of coffee in front of her. We need to leave soon. They gathered their belongings and, with the glass carefully secured, left the house and headed toward the cemetery. The journey was tense. Camila kept looking over her shoulder, expecting to see Mauricio's silhouette or someone sent by him. When they reached the chapel where Gasper was hiding, they knocked 3 times. The old man opened the door with the same hardened expression as always. Get in quickly. Inside, the dim light of an oil lamp illuminated the small space filled with papers and old boxes. Gasper crossed his arms. Did you get it? Camila took out the wrapped glass and placed it on the table. Here it is. Gasper examined it carefully before nodding. Well done. He took a white powder from a small toolbox and began sprinkling it over the glass. Slowly, the fingerprint became visible. Gasper smiled with satisfaction. This will work. Amelia felt the air return to her lungs. What's next? Gasper took a roll of special adhesive tape and carefully lifted the fingerprint from the glass, placing it onto a transparent plastic sheet. With this, we can trick the biometric scanner on the safe. Camila exhaled nervously. When do we do it? Gasper looked at them seriously. Tonight? The silence in the chapel was overwhelming. Amelia exchanged a glance with Camila. Then tonight, we finish this. Gasper gave a slight smile. If everything goes well, by tomorrow, that man will have no power over you. But no one in the room dared to say what they were all thinking. If something went wrong, they might not live to tell the tale. The final blow. Night fell like a cloak of uncertainty. Camila and Emilia met Gasper outside the building where Mauricio had his office. Gasper carried a small bag of tools. We'll go in through the back. There are fewer cameras. The plan was clear. Gasper would unlock the security door, Camila would use the fake fingerprint, and Emilia would keep watch outside. Fear weighed heavy in their stomachs, but there was no turning back. Gasper pulled out a lockpick and started working on the lock. After a few seconds, the door opened. Let's go. Camila stepped in cautiously, Emilia right behind her. The hallways were dark and silent. They moved forward until they reached Mauricio's office, where the safe was hidden behind a bookshelf. Camila knelt and pressed the biometric scanner with a fake fingerprint. The scanner blinked. Emilia held her breath. A beep. The safe opened. Gasper smiled. Well done. Camila began pulling out documents, photographs, and a USB drive with information. But before they could react, a noise in the hallway made them freeze. Footsteps. Emilia felt the world come to a halt. Someone was coming. Camila quickly shut the safe and stuffed the documents into her bag. We have to get out of here. But it was too late. The office door burst open. Mauricio was there. His dark gaze swept across the room and landed on them. The air grew heavy. Mauricio stepped forward slowly. I knew you were up to something. Camila reached for her bag, gripping it tightly. Emilia stepped in front of her. You can't hide what you've done anymore. Mauricio chuckled. And what are you going to do? Report me? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a gun. The air turned ice cold. You're not leaving this place. Time seemed to slow down. Gasper moved his hand silently, reaching for a glass lamp on the desk. Mauricio took a step forward. Say your last words. At that moment, Gasper threw the lamp with all his strength. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces and the light flickered. Mauricio was distracted for a split second. Just enough for Camila and Emilia to run. Gasper followed as Mauricio cursed and fired wildly. Bullets shattered the windows, but none hit them. They ran down the hallway, their hearts pounding in their ears. When they reached the back exit, Gasper locked the door. He turned to them, breathing heavily. We need to go. Emilia looked at Camila's bag. We have everything we need. Gasper nodded. Then let's run before they find us. The dark night swallowed them as they escaped. The danger wasn't over yet. But now, they had the truth in their hands. And there was no turning back. The icy early morning air cut through Emilia's skin as they ran through the deserted streets. Their footsteps echoed on the pavement, fast, uneven, desperate. Camila clutched the bag tightly against her chest, the only piece of evidence that could bring Mauricio down. Gasper led the way, his breath ragged, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. Faster! He shouted without looking back. The lights of a few buildings flickered in the distance. Emilia felt her heart pounding against her chest, each beat louder than the last. Behind them, an engine roared. The screech of tires blended with a loud noise Emilia recognized instantly. Gunshots. They instinctively ducked as bullets slammed into the nearby walls. Gasper shoved Camila into a narrow alley. Here. Camila ran without thinking, gripping the bag in one hand and her fear in the other. Emilia followed closely, adrenaline surging through her veins. Mauricio was hunting them. They managed to lose themselves in the shadows of an alleyway. Gasper stopped, resting his hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. Camila pressed herself against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment, trying to calm the desperation burning inside her. He's going to kill us, she whispered, her voice trembling. Emilia gripped her hand tightly. Not if we get to the police first. Gasper straightened up and pulled out his phone. I have a contact at the precinct. We can trust him. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. I need to see you now, Gasper said in a low voice. The person on the other end hesitated for a moment. Is this about Mauricio? Yes. Meet me at the station. But hurry. Gasper hung up and looked at Emilia and Camila. This is our best shot. Camila pressed her lips together. If the police do nothing, we're dead. Amelia felt the weight of those words. Then let's pray they do the right thing. The final move. They arrived at the precinct with dirty clothes and exhaustion written all over their faces. The officer met them at the back entrance, leading them into a small office, away from prying eyes. "Tell me you have evidence," he said as soon as he shut the door. Camila pulled out the documents and the USB drive, placing them on the table with trembling hands. "It's all here." The officer scanned through the papers quickly, his eyes darkening with each page. "This is enough to open an official investigation." Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. "How long will it take?" The officer let out a heavy sigh. "It depends. Mauricio has connections in the system. If he finds out too soon, he could disappear." Camila tensed. "What if they arrest him right now?" The officer shook his head. "We need to build the case. We can't make mistakes." Amelia felt fear growing inside her. "That means we're still in danger." The agent nodded. "For now, the best thing you can do is hide." Gasper crossed his arms. "We can't just sit around and wait for him to find us." The agent rubbed his forehead. "I'm going to need something more solid. Something that will tie him down for good." Camila shivered. "Then we have to face him." Amelia looked at her in horror. "What are you talking about?" Camila clenched her teeth. "If we can get him to confess on a recording, there will be no way for him to escape." Gasper shook his head. "It's too risky." The agent hesitated for a moment. "But it could work." Fear was almost tangible in the room. Camila straightened up. "I'm going to do it." Amelia grabbed her arm. "I'm not letting you do this alone." Gasper sighed. "Then we do it right." The confrontation. Mauricio was in his office when Camila walked in. The man looked up, an expression of disbelief on his face. "Are you here to turn yourself in?" Camila kept her composure and closed the door behind her. "I want to talk." Mauricio leaned back in his chair with a mocking smile. "I'm listening." Camila moved forward slowly. "Last night was a mistake." Mauricio narrowed his eyes. "Oh, really?" "Yes. I shouldn't have gotten involved in this." Mauricio watched her in silence, measuring every word. "And what do you expect me to do about it?" Camila stopped a meter away from him. "I need protection." Mauricio laughed. "Protection from what?" Camila lowered her gaze. "The police know everything." Mauricio tensed up. "What did you say?" "They have evidence. Documents. Witnesses." The man's face hardened. "You're lying." "No. And they're coming for you." Mauricio stood up abruptly. "If you think I'm just going to sit back and do nothing, you're wrong." Camila stared at him. "We can make a deal." Mauricio crossed his arms. "What kind of deal?" Camila felt her heart pounding. "I can make the evidence disappear." Mauricio eyed her warily. "And what do you want in return?" Camila exhaled. "Your word that you'll leave us alone." The man laughed. "You think I'll trust you?" Camila lifted her chin. "You have no choice." Mauricio stared at her in silence. "If you're deceiving me, I swear you'll pay with your life." Camila swallowed hard. "I'm not deceiving you." Mauricio watched her for several more seconds before nodding. "All right. Tell me what I have to do." Camila pulled out her phone. "Say that you accept the deal." Mauricio frowned. "Why?" "For security." The man looked at her suspiciously. "Say it." Mauricio glared at her with restrained anger before letting out a dry laugh. "Fine. I accept the deal." Just then, the office door burst open. Gasper, Amelia, and the police officer entered with their guns drawn. Mauricio turned immediately, but it was too late. "You're under arrest," the officer said firmly. Mauricio felt the trap close around him. "Damn you." The officer cuffed him while Gasper grinned. "You fell for it, bastard." Camila stopped the recording on her phone and let out the breath she had been holding. They had won. The end of terror. Mauricio was handcuffed and taken out of the building. The police checked the USB drive and confirmed that the evidence was sufficient to prosecute him for fraud, corruption, and murder. When everything was over, Camila collapsed into a chair, her hands trembling. Amelia knelt in front of her and took her hands. "It's over, my daughter." Camila felt the tears slide down her face. "It's over." Matthias appeared in the doorway, his expression confused. "Mom?" Camila looked at him and felt the weight of the world lift off her shoulders. She stood up and hugged him tightly. "Everything is going to be okay, my love." Emilia watched them and felt that, for the first time in a long while, they could finally breathe in peace. They had defeated the monster. And now, at last, they could start again. The morning breeze drifted gently through the window of Emilia's small house. For the first time in a long while, the air didn't feel heavy, didn't carry the shadow of imminent danger. Everything had changed. Mauricio was behind bars. The evidence against him was solid, irrefutable. His web of corruption was collapsing like a house of cards, and with each passing day, more witnesses came forward, more accusations surfaced. But the war had left scars. From the doorway, Emilia watched Camila, who was sitting in the small backyard. She held a cup of coffee in her hands but didn't drink. She just stared at the ground, her gaze empty. The past still surrounded her. Matthias played with toy cars in the dirt, oblivious to the dark thoughts swirling in his mother's mind. Emilia walked over and sat beside her. "You're still thinking about it." Camila let out a sigh. "It's hard not to." Emilia looked at her with tenderness. "You don't have to carry this anymore." Camila tightened her grip on the cup. "What if it follows me? What if I can never leave it behind?" Emilia gently took her hand. "You're not the same woman you were before. You were brave. You protected your son. You made hard but necessary choices." Camila exhaled deeply. "Sometimes I feel like Julian is still here. Like he's watching us." Emilia's eyes filled with tears. "If he were, he'd be proud of you." Camila looked at her with a mix of gratitude and pain. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if he had known the truth from the start." Emilia gently stroked her arm. "Maybe everything would have been different. Or maybe fate was already written." The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence of understanding, of acceptance. Matthias ran up to his mother, a smile on his face. "Mom, can I go play with the other kids?" Camila looked at him for a moment before nodding. "Of course, my love." The boy threw himself into her arms, and she hugged him tightly, as if she feared that if she let go, everything would disappear. When Matthias ran out onto the street, Emilia sighed. "He's strong. Stronger than you think." Camila ran a hand through her hair. "I just hope he doesn't remember all of this when he grows up." Emilia looked at her tenderly. "What he will remember is that his mother did everything for him." Camila set the cup down on the table and rubbed her face with both hands. "And now what?" Emilia gave her a warm smile. "Now we start over. A past that still hurts." Weeks passed, and life slowly began to regain its rhythm. Camila found a job at a small shop in town. It wasn't anything extraordinary, but it gave her stability. Emilia returned to her usual routine at home, taking care of Matthias, cooking, and trying to fill the empty spaces with love and patience. But not everything had healed. There were nights when Camila woke up startled, her body covered in a cold sweat. The shadows of the past still haunted her dreams. Emilia was always there. She would bring her a glass of water, cover her with a blanket, and remind her that it was all over. "The ghosts of the past don't disappear overnight," she told her one night while holding her. Camila sobbed against her shoulder. "Sometimes I feel like they never will." Emilia sighed, gently running her fingers through her hair. "They will. You just need time." The scar that can't be seen. One afternoon, while tidying up some things in Matthias' room, Camila found a box she didn't remember storing. When she opened it, she discovered old photographs of Julian. She froze, holding one of them between her fingers. It was a picture of her husband with Matthias when he was just a baby. The memories rushed in like a gust of wind. The laughter, the hugs, the nights when he would cover her with his jacket when it was cold. And then, guilt. The guilt of not having seen the signs earlier. Of not having done something to save him. Emilia found her sitting on the floor, surrounded by scattered photos. She didn't ask any questions. She simply knelt beside her and hugged her tightly. "Stop punishing yourself, my dear." Camila closed her eyes and let the tears flow. "I miss him so much." Emilia nodded. "So do I." The pain was a weight they both carried. But together, they could bear it. A new beginning. The months passed by. Matthias turned 9, and Camila organized a small party with his school friends. For the first time in a long while, the house was filled with genuine laughter, with joy free from fear. Emilia watched the scene from the dining table, her heart overflowing with gratitude. Camila sat beside her, holding a piece of cake in her hand. Today is a good day. Emilia smiled. Yes, it is. Camila looked at her son as he ran across the yard. For the first time in a long time, I feel like we can breathe. Emilia gently took her hand. Because we made it. Camila looked at her, eyes filled with emotion. Thank you for not leaving me alone. Emilia caressed her cheek tenderly. I will always be with you. The sun began to set on the horizon. The colors of the sunset painted the sky in golden and orange hues. It was the symbol of closure, of a cycle that had come to an end. The storm had passed, and finally, they could walk toward a future without fear. Because, despite everything, they had found a way forward. Together, like a true family. What did you think of this story? Let us know in the comments. What would you do in a similar situation? We invite you to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends or family as a show of support. This motivates us to continue posting exciting stories almost every day. Don't miss the next amazing narrative that's about to appear on your screen. We truly appreciate having you here with us. You can click on the links appearing on your screen now. We have an exclusive selection of captivating stories and guaranteed entertainment just for you. See you in the next video. A big hug.